The moment I said I'm not under your HOA, everything went quiet. The kind of quiet that happens right before a bomb goes off. You could hear the wind brushing through the hedges, the faint hum of traffic 2 blocks away, even the shallow, furious breathing of the HOA officer standing in front of me. His face was tight with rage, harsh lines carved into his 50-something features like he'd spent his entire life clenching his jaw. Short brown hair combed too neatly, piercing eyes that had probably scared hundreds of homeowners into submission, a stiff, military-straight posture inside a black formal jacket and pressed trousers that made him look more like a tyrant than a neighbor. And there I was, 65 years old, silver stubble, skin toughened by decades of sun and hard work, standing on my own sidewalk in a dusty tan Stetson, a worn denim shirt with pearl snaps, and a leather vest that had seen more miles than his luxury sedan ever would. Behind me, the mountain range glowed orange and purple in the sunset, as calm and eternal as I felt inside. He jabbed a finger at my chest. "You're in violation. You will comply or I will call the police." I looked him dead in the eye and said it slowly so he could feel every word. "I am not under your HOA." That was when he snapped. He pulled out his phone with a sharp, angry motion, like a gunslinger reaching for a revolver. His thumb stabbed at the screen. His lips curled. "We'll see about that," he said, already dialing. And right there, right in front of my driveway, the man who thought he owned the neighborhood called the cops on me. What he didn't know, what not a single one of those board members knew, was that I didn't just live on that block. I owned it. Every inch, every parcel, every lot, and the trap had already been set. Now, let me take you back, because to understand how this all happened and how I took my revenge without a single authority lifting a finger, you need to know who I am and what this HOA thought they could get away with. I moved into that neighborhood quietly. No moving trucks, no loud introductions, just me, a few crates, and a pickup that had seen better days. The homes looked clean, too clean. Trimmed lawns, identical mailboxes, cameras peeking from under eaves like paranoid little eyes. HOA territory. You could always tell. I'd been through enough in my life to recognize a place run by people who like to control others. I'd worked in land acquisition, property investment, and quiet negotiations for most of my career. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't rich in the way people imagine, but I knew how to play the long game. The house I bought was at the corner of the block, a modest, well-kept place with a wide driveway and a view of the mountains. I liked the light. I liked the silence. I thought I could finally breathe. That illusion lasted about 3 days. On the 4th morning, there was a knock on my door. Sharp, precise, not friendly. I opened it to see him, the HOA officer. Same man, same black jacket, same eyes that looked at you like you were already guilty. "HOA compliance," he said. "No hello, no welcome, just authority." He handed me a clipboard. "You're in violation. Your truck is parked facing the wrong direction. Your grass is half an inch too long, and your mailbox doesn't match the community standard." I blinked at him, then glanced at my truck, then my grass, then back at him. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm the HOA officer for this block, and you will comply within 24 hours. I smiled. Just a little. "I don't think so." His face hardened. "Excuse me?" I said, "I don't think so. I'm not under your HOA." That's when he saw that flicker of rage behind his eyes. "Everyone here is under the HOA." "Not me." He scoffed. "You bought property inside our jurisdiction." "No," I said calmly. "I bought property next to it." He laughed, actually laughed. "Sir, I have the maps. I have the records. You are in violation." I leaned against my doorframe, feeling the sun on my face. "Then you might want to look again." That was when he stormed off, muttering threats under his breath. And from that moment on, my life on that block became a daily war. Not loud, not violent, but relentless. They left violation notices on my door. They sent letters. They photographed my yard. They fined me for things I wasn't even part of. My truck, my fence, my porch light. Every time I ignored them, and every time their anger grew. Now, here's the hook you need to understand. The HOA didn't know who they were dealing with. They thought I was just an old man who didn't want to follow rules. They had no idea that while they were busy measuring grass and counting porch decorations, I was busy quietly pulling strings that went much, much deeper. You see, years earlier, a development company had quietly gone bankrupt. They owned most of the land under that entire block. Not the houses, not the lawns, but the actual parcels. And when they went under, their holdings went up for auction. Quiet auctions, the kind nobody notices unless they're looking. I was looking. Over the course of 6 months, through shell companies and clean contracts, I bought them all, one by one. Every lot, every underlying deed, every strip of land the HOA thought it controlled. And when I finally moved in, I wasn't just a homeowner. I was the landlord to the whole block. But I didn't tell them that. Not yet. I let the HOA keep harassing me. I let the officer threaten me. I let them think they had power. Because revenge tastes best when the other side doesn't see it coming. Then came the day he called the cops. He was standing in my driveway, red-faced, veins popping out of his neck. "You have 3 violations and unpaid fines. You are refusing to comply. This is now a legal matter." I folded my arms. "I told you, I'm not under your HOA. "Enough," he snapped, pulling out his phone. "You're trespassing on HOA-regulated land and obstructing compliance." And that's when he dialed. The neighbors peeked from behind their curtains. People love drama when it isn't happening to them. When the police arrived, the officer started talking fast, pointing at me like I was some kind of criminal. "He refuses to follow HOA rules. He's violating community standards. He's disruptive." The cop looked at me. I tipped my hat politely. "Sir, do you live here?" the cop asked. "I do." "Are you part of the HOA?" "No." The HOA officer scoffed. "He is. He's lying." I reached into my vest and pulled out a folded document. Deed records, parcel maps, ownership certificates. "Actually," I said, handing them over, "he is." The cop's face went pale as he read. Because right there, in black and white, it showed that the HOA didn't own the land. I did. The cop handed the papers back slowly. "Sir, this appears to be a civil dispute, but he is not under your HOA." The HOA officer stared at me like I just punched him in the gut. "But that's impossible," he whispered. I leaned in close. "You should have checked before you tried to bully me." The cops left. The neighbors went back inside, and the HOA officer walked away in silence. But that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. Because when someone tries to humiliate you, when they try to control you, when they think they own you, you don't just beat them, you make sure they never forget. Over the next few weeks, I exercised my rights as landowner, quietly, legally, personally. I notified every homeowner that their HOA's land lease was invalid, that the roads, the sidewalks, the common areas, all of it sat on property I held the deeds to, and that their so-called authority had been built on a lie. The panic spread like wildfire. Phones rang, emails flew, board members scrambled. The HOA officer came back, this time without his anger, just fear. "We need to talk," he said. I looked at him, the mountains glowing behind me again. "Now you want to talk? We can make a deal. We can work something out." I smiled, slow and cold. "No," I said. "Now you listen." And in that moment, the man who once threatened me realized something terrifying. He never had any power at all, and I had all of it. That's the kind of revenge that doesn't need fists or cops or courts, just patience, just planning, and the quiet satisfaction of watching a tyrant realize he's standing on land that was never his. So the next time someone tries to tell you what you can and can't do on your own property, remember my story. Because sometimes the old man in the Stetson isn't just a neighbor. Sometimes he owns the ground you're standing on. The HOA officer didn't come back for 3 days after that humiliation with the cops. 3 long, quiet days where the neighborhood felt like it was holding its breath. You could feel it in the way curtains twitched, in the way people slowed their cars when they passed my house, even the way the birds seemed hesitant to land on the manicured hedges. Fear has a sound, and it was humming softly through that perfect little block. I kept doing what I always did. I sat on my porch at sunset, Stetson tilted low, watching the mountains glow like burning embers. I drank my coffee in the mornings. I parked my truck wherever I pleased. I let my grass grow just a little longer than their precious regulations allowed. Not because I had to, but because I wanted them to feel powerless every time they saw it. And then on the fourth day, I felt it before I saw it. That pressure in the air, that tight, sour energy that comes when someone is coming for you. I turned just as his black sedan rolled up to the curb. The HOA officer stepped out slowly like a predator who had lost a fight but hadn't forgotten the taste of blood. His jacket was still pressed, his posture still stiff, but something was different. The fire in his eyes had been replaced with something darker, desperation. He walked up my driveway without asking, didn't knock, didn't announce himself, just stood there in front of me while I was sanding a piece of old cedar for my porch. "We need to talk." The quiet after he walked away didn't feel like peace yet. It felt like the deep breath before something even bigger breaks loose. You could sense it in the neighborhood, like the ground itself was uneasy under all those perfect little houses. People smiled when they saw me now, but behind those smiles was fear. Fear of change, fear of losing what they thought was stable, fear of realizing they'd been controlled for years by a man who never truly owned a single inch of what he ruled. And I knew something they didn't. The HOA officer wasn't finished. Men like him never are. 2 nights later, I was sitting on my porch, the mountains dark against a velvet sky, when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Not one car, 3. Slow, careful, like they didn't want to be noticed. That was my next hook, the moment I knew this story was about to turn darker. 3 silhouettes stepped out of the cars. One of them was him. Even in the dim porch light, I could recognize that rigid posture and that tight, aggressive stance. He was wearing that black jacket again, like armor. The other 2 looked like board members, soft hands, expensive shoes, faces that had never known real labor but loved real power. They didn't knock. They stood at the edge of my property line. "You need to stop this," he called out. I took my time getting up, let him feel ignored, let the tension build. When I finally stepped into the light, his eyes locked onto me like a hunter spotting prey. "Stop what?" I asked. "You're poisoning the community," one of the board members snapped. "You're turning people against us." I smiled faintly. Funny how truth does that. The HOA officer stepped forward. "You think you're clever, buying land through shell companies, playing quiet, but you made a mistake." "Oh?" I said. "You underestimated how far we're willing to go." There it was, the threat. I felt it in my chest, but I didn't show it. I'd faced worse things than 3 frightened tyrants in my life. "Get off my land," I said calmly. One of them laughed nervously. "Your land? You really think a court would side with you?" I stepped closer, just enough that they could see the silver in my stubble and the scars time had left on my face. "I don't need a court." The HOA officer's jaw tightened. "You're bluffing." "No," I said softly. "I'm warning you." They left, but I knew what that visit meant. They were desperate, and desperate people make dangerous choices. The next morning, my fence was cut, clean through. Not random, not careless. A message. By noon, someone had dumped trash on my driveway. Broken furniture, rotting bags, old appliances. The HOA was trying to frame me, trying to make me look like the problem. That was when I decided it was time to end this. Not with lawyers, not with police, but with something much more powerful. The truth. I invited every homeowner on the block to my property that evening. Not with threats, not with demands, with simple words. "Come hear what you've been paying for." They came. Dozens of them, standing under the fading orange sky, looking at me like I held the answer to something they'd never been allowed to question. The HOA officer watched from across the street, his face dark with fury. I spoke calmly. I told them about the land, the deeds, the money, the lies. I showed them the documents. And as I spoke, you could feel it, that slow, horrible realization spreading through the crowd. They'd been paying for a lie, and the man who'd threatened me was the one who sold it to them. That was the beginning of the end, and the best part, he knew it. The crowd didn't explode like you might expect. There was no screaming, no wild shouting. What spread through them was something much worse for a man like him: cold understanding. People stared at the papers in their hands, then at the HOA officer across the street. Some looked betrayed, others looked angry. A few just looked tired, like they'd been carrying a weight for years and were only now realizing why. He tried to speak. He actually raised his voice. "This is manipulation. He's twisting facts. We've always operated within our authority." No one moved. No one believed him. And that silence, that was his execution. I stepped forward, slow, steady, letting every eye fall on me. You were told what to plant, what to park, what color your doors could be, and you paid for the privilege, but you were never paying for protection. You were paying for control. That was the hook that locked them in. I could feel it, every neighbor leaning forward just a little. And the worst part, I added, none of it was real. The HOA officer's face was turning red now. "You think you've won because you have some paperwork? People don't want chaos, they want order." A woman in the crowd spoke up. "We wanted fairness." A man added, "We wanted honesty." Another voice said, "We wanted respect." And suddenly he wasn't standing in front of a crowd. He was standing alone. That was the moment he understood what real power was. Not a clipboard, not fines, not threats, but consent. And he just lost all of it. He walked towards me, fists clenched, eyes burning. For a second, I thought he actually might hit me. 65 years of living has taught me something about men like him. They're loud until they realize they're not in charge anymore. "You did this," he hissed. I met his gaze without blinking. "No, I let you finish what you started." Then I said the words that ended him. "Everyone here now knows the HOA doesn't own the ground beneath their feet, and they know who's been lying about it." The board members who had come with him earlier that week were already backing away. One of them actually slipped into his car and drove off, abandoning him. He stood there, shoulders sagging, authority leaking out of him like air from a punctured tire. "You can't run this neighborhood anymore," I said quietly. "Not because I say so, but because they don't believe you anymore." That was the revenge. Not courts, not police, not even force. Just stripping away the illusion. One by one, homeowners began walking past him, not around him, past him, ignoring him like he was already gone. He tried to call out. No one turned. That night, the HOA was dead. Not on paper, in spirit. Over the next few weeks, the rules stopped being enforced, the letters stopped coming, the fines disappeared. People planted what they wanted, parked how they wanted, lived how they wanted. And the man who once ruled them, he sold his house, moved away, vanished. I still sit on my porch at sunset, mountains glowing just like always. Same Stetson, same old chair, same quiet strength. But now the block feels different, free. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud or bloody. Sometimes it's just letting the truth do what it always does: break tyrants. And if this story taught you anything, let it be this: never assume the man standing quietly in the corner doesn't own the ground you're standing on.